accepted.
Wow, amazing. Amazing start. Like, I really shall we start now? Some people are still coming, but we are not going to wait. So today we're going to talk about how to build using, let's say, APIs and API management and AI, some sort of application. I will show you how you can integrate API management solution into OpenAI API to achieve something workable. So before starting, let me introduce myself. My name is Bobur, or you can call me Tiger. Bobur means tiger. Second last name means Livermore. If you combine it, like the tiger who is living longer, right? If you want to reach out to me about sessions, or if you want to leave feedback after the session, here are my social accounts. I'm always ready to answer any questions about APIs, because I'm an API expert. If you want to learn about Java, I'm also a Java developer. So actually, let me ask one thing, because Devoxx is a little bit connected to Java. Who are here Java developers? Oh, you see, wow, so many. Yeah, I am also a Java developer, yeah. So great. First thing first, here is the agenda we're going to go through today. We'll start by explaining what is API gateway for those who doesn't know. Who knows the API gateway? Maybe raise your hand. There are some people who knows. Great. Who doesn't know? I know many people know. Good, good. If you don't know it, I'm going to shortly explain what it is, and we can take from there. And also, I will introduce some of the benefits of using API gateway with your backend services or with your infrastructure, like how you can use this OpenAI API. But the next question I have, who is using OpenAI API, not ChatGPT? One person. Who else? Did you do integration like with OpenAI API, like to make some capability of AI modeling? Okay, okay. Yeah, who is using ChatGPT then? Oh, so many people are. Okay, I'm also using ChatGPT, and then I start to think what if I want to build something more customized solution, right? And in this case, I can use OpenAI API. I will explain what it is. It's actually a website where you can ask AI model through REST API, right? And then we will also look at some of the cross-cutting concerns, like what API gateway can do for you to solve existing problems in your development, right? And then I will have a short demo at the end, show you step by step how you can start to use API gateway, and then use some primary functionalities today already. So APIs, just 3 letters, right? Stands for what? What the API means? Yeah, great, yeah. Who doesn't know API? Everybody knows. Okay, because we are living in an increasingly API-centric world, right? Every service we use today uses API, or it is API itself. Like, we are building API to integrate with another product. Even, as you can see, ChatGPT also uses API, because if you want to retrieve some AI-generated models, responses, you can ask ChatGPT through the REST API, or you can maybe use GraphQL API. If you are a GraphQL favorite one, you can use it as well. Or recently, ChatGPT have been announced that you can also build your custom plugins, right? Which allows you to talk to your API and get some data from your API with a combination of AI. You can ask everything. For example, you can book your flights or hotels just in the chat. There are some plugins already available in the market, right? If you check ChatGPT, if you have a Plus premium version. Otherwise, you can start to use already this free account, right? I'm not selling ChatGPT today because it's a little bit combination. and like APIs is important, right? Next question comes like how I can build successful APIs. There is an answer like it should be highly available, right? My API, and should be performance enough. It should work very fast, right? And I should be able to integrate with third-party applications and other APIs. This is the 3 indicators of success where you can say my API is successful. And next, how to achieve this? Do you know how to achieve this? How to make your API successful? I know. One of the solutions is using API gateway. API gateway is a kind of essential part of API management solution. When we talk about API management, like it's not only API gateway, it has also an API portal where developers can use your API gateway, or it has also UI dashboard where you can make some configuration, right? This is API management. And today we're going to talk about this essential part of API management, which is API gateway, right? Why? Because nowadays we are building multiple microservices or backend services to provide some sort of functionality to the client app, right? In the past, we had a monolith application. We do have still monoliths, but sometimes we want to use serverless, or we want to use just a database, maybe without database, just we are maybe using spreadsheet as a database, right? Anyway, we do have a lot of services. And our client applications, as you can see on the left side, when you look from this angle, right? On the left side, the client application can be web application, desktop, maybe, or mobile application. They are sending requests to the backend services. And here in this picture, API gateway acts as a single layer between your client requests and internal services, like backend service, REST APIs, database, or third-party services, and so on. It can route all incoming requests to the intended destinations, right? This is an official description of API gateway. And by understanding it's a single entry point, we can achieve a lot of more. We can do authentication. We can also enable authorization, all the security features out of the box without writing any code. Like you can assume in Java, like we have Spring Security or Spring Cloud Gateway. Who is using Spring Cloud Gateway? If we have a lot of Java developers. Yeah. I'm not saying like Spring Cloud Gateway is great, but I'm going to explain like Java, how you can use existing plugins with API Gateway so that you can enable these cross-cutting features like observability or transformation with help of plugins. Like, because API Gateway, you can extend it with the help of some built-in connectors, right? We call it extensions or plugins. We can also build your own plugin. So one of the API Gateway I'm going to talk to you, like called Apache API 6. It's under Apache Software Foundation. Maybe you know already the world's largest software foundation. Probably some of you already part of it. Who is actually contributing to any Apache Software Foundation projects, open source? Only few people. Kafka. Who is using Kafka? Yeah, you see, also it's under Apache. It started with Apache, right? Like Cassandra, Tomcat. You can think of other famous projects. API 6 is also one of the top projects now, increasingly gaining some popularity when you're working with API gateways, API management, because it's fully open source, it's for free, and also it has some features like plugins or hot reloading of plugins, like you can add more plugins as you wish without stopping your server. Like it can run additional functionalities while your application are running without downtime, right? This is a cool features that I know. Some of the features also that I like in this open source project, if you are not Lua programming language developer, you can write also in your favorite programming language to create your own custom plugins. Because sometimes existing plugins, API 6 has, let's say, over 100 existing plugins, but sometimes you need to build your own plugin. You can use, for example, your Java skills. There's a Java plugin runner, or you can use Python plugin runner to create your own plugin. But basically, this project written in Lua. based on Nginx server. So this is a quick introduction. And another feature that I like, if you don't like to write any code, you can use a dashboard, like a low-code dashboard, where you can just put some components together to build your own plugin. Or you can orchestrate one or multiple plugins together to create some more comprehensive plugin that you want, right? This is for low coders who is lazy, right? You can use also dashboard. This is also for free. And now let's jump back to the initial discussion, like what's OpenAI API? This is just works as ChatGPT, but you need to request all the time APIs to collect some information. For example, what it provides: text completion. It has text completion endpoint, like /completion. If you call this text completion endpoint, you can ask everything. Like I'm going to also show in the demo, you can ask everything, it can answer you, like ChatGPT does, right? Or there's another endpoint called code completion. You can ask, please complete the code or find a bug in this code, also through the API. Not with ChatGPT or while you are using the UI, but if you want to build your own chat features, you can use this API, right? Or it has also capabilities like image generation. You can create from one image another image, variations of existing image, right? I believe some data engineers or AI engineers, they know how this works. And you can ask me now, okay, Bobur, how, we know now OpenAI API, we know API 6, API gateway, and how we can get the benefit out of this using integrations, right? First of all, when you integrate with OpenAI API, with API gateway, you can get security features. Security features like you don't have to implement yourself login, password, or you don't need to manage your API consumers. API gateway does itself. Just don't worry about like how you are integrating with SSO or integrating with Google identity providers because it has a support to other identity providers. You can bring the security features quickly. And also observability next feature, I would say you can observe your APIs because API gateway sits in the middle, knows everything like logs, metrics, traces. You can collect these traces, show it on the Prometheus, or you can show it in Grafana. You can collect some logs and send to Datadog. All right, who's using Grafana? All right, so many people. Because we are using also Grafana in the development, right? These API gateways, not on API 6, we have a lot of API gateways in the market, like we can think or choose one of them, like we have Kong, also next greatest API gateway that I know. And also performance, of course, scalability, because you can scale how you want, because API gateway exposes some URLs, right, endpoint URLs, and you are not going to change these URLs, but in the behind the scene, you can add more services, right? You can scale it, like you can have a multiple instance of your one service, but it doesn't affect on your user side, because API gateway is not going to change, right? This is the 4 great benefits you can get by using plugins, right? For example, you can enable rate limiting features for your APIs. Let's say you are building a new startup and you are selling some APIs, some features through the API. And the first thing you will think about how I can monetize my new API. You can start by implementing some policies, right? So my users can only, free users, I mean, can only request 100 times per second. And if they want to request more, please buy paid, the layer, right? So in this case, the rate limiting plugin is quite helpful. You can use it. Some authentication, traffic control plugins, caching. These are categories of different plugins you can think of, right? So with that theoretical knowledge in mind, now we know some theory, right? I'm going to jump into demo now what I built and what you can build. I'm going to explain, right? Before going there, because I said like API 6 also open source community, we have a lot of projects over there, and I do have also some giveaways. It's not company branding, because API 6 is not company. It is from open source. I bring here Estonian chocolates on API 6 logo. I live in Estonia, in Tallinn. There is a very famous chocolate factory. It's called Kalev. So I'm going to put here on the table. So after this session, you can take. And I do have also, this sort of medals. Like you can just put here. And you are already Apache committer. So, yeah, right? So great. And at the end, I will have some other gifts, but it will be secret. So here, this is overall picture, what we're going to build today. Assume that you are building a UI, right? We're talking about now backend, but you can have a UI also. UI part means web application, browser, maybe desktop application or mobile application. Usually, they request a backend application, right? Through API, always, if you want to separate backend and frontend. If you have both, it's okay. And the actual great architecture is when the backend is separated from frontend, right? And we are going to build one single API called Ask Me Anything. Like you can ask anything, it can answer. Because we have AI combination. It calls OpenAI API.com. You can visit also this website. You can collect your API key and start to use it. And in the middle, we'll put API gateway. Let's say I'm building website, my website domain.com, and I have single endpoint, ask me anything, that calls API compilation endpoint from AI to get some responses. But in the middle, it can catch these requests and add us some features, like I can route requests to responsible services, because API gateway knows which route should go to which service, right? And also, I can manage my API consumers. I can create one or multiple API consumers for my APIs using API management or API gateway. And then you can also, as I said, rate limiting enable rate limiting, or you can version your APIs like V1 or V2 without any failures. Like you can switch from V1 to V2, like when you're doing some new features announcement, right? We'll start building with V1, and we can slowly jump to V2 version. So one of the greatest features that I love is caching, because AI models is not for free. You need to respond sometimes, right? So in API gateway level, also you can cache the responses coming from AI sometimes, if you don't repeat the same request and pay more money, right? There's also caching mechanism inside the gateway. So is it clear, the diagram? Not difficult, right? Not complex. One single API, they are talking to each other. That's all. And we are building some feature. If you have now something not clear, maybe you can ask. But let's start with some practice now. Before forgetting this diagram. Also, here, let me present once again. I have on my GitHub account fully guide some with code examples. Like if you scan it, like it will bring you to a GitHub account where after this session, maybe you can give a try. Like it's a hands-on lab. Because we are limited on time, you can finish yourself, like if you want to try. There is also a blog I wrote, like you can read the blog if you want. So with that, let's start. First thing, I'm going to show you this. This is OpenAI.com, also like ChatGPT said, and I created my account first. Here, I have my account, and I have API key. Because in order to use OpenAI API, you should have a key, right? They are giving you some keys, and you can reuse these keys. And I think it's not for free already. 2 months ago, it was $18 like you can get when you create your first account for free. But now, because I reused it already, I overused it, every API calls I did, now I am paying, actually. It's paid now, the functionality. So once you collect your API key, start to build something great, right? What we are going to build, I'm going to ask ChatGPT to respond to me. Let's send some request to OpenAI. First request is without using any API gateway. this looks like this. I took this from the API example, API request example of the website. We can find, for example, in documentation, how to send requests to OpenAI API. It's quite straightforward, right? And you can use curl commands, you can use Postman, or you can use maybe UI if you want to prefer not to use curl commands. We're going to use curl commands to send some requests now. First request, as you can see, I hope it's visible, right? I can make it a little bit bigger. Is it okay? Oh, sorry. Sorry. Now, is it fine, right? Text. Everybody can see. Well, what about the last row? Oh, okay, thank you. As you can see, what's happening now? Don't copy my API key because until I finish, until I'm finished, because it's happened the last time. Someone took my API key and before I finish my talk, because after I finish my talk, I revoke my token, so you cannot use it. What kind of request I'm sending? I'm sending a request / completion endpoint with authorization in the header. I'm setting in the authorization API key, right? And then I am sending in the body, JSON body, some sort of asking. I am asking, what's the Devoxx in Poland? Now it should answer me, right? Let's try this. A simple curl command, right? Simple curl command we are sending now to OpenAI. Not this one. Okay, let's go. It takes some time. It depends on the Wi-Fi connection, and also it depends on AI how it's working fast or slowly. Let's wait a bit. Let's sync the AI. Yeah, you see, it's answering like Devoxx. It's saying like Software Developer Architects IT Professionals Conference. It's Java, Poland Java user groups initiated this. Clear, right? It's answering. Because I limited my tokens up to 256. You can have a longer text also, but it doesn't make sense now for demo purposes, right? Or I don't want to spend my money shortly. So now it's clear, right, how AI works. Now I will introduce API gateway in the middle. So what we do first step, all the API gateway providers, they have 3 basics you need to understand. Like one basic is route. It's called, like in theory, route means it's capable of routing your request to the intended destination. You need to show which request should go to which backend. This is called routing mechanism. Next one is, second one is upstream. Basically, upstream means your backend server. Like you will show in your route configuration, okay, this is my upstream. I have a single node, multiple nodes, and you put into a route configuration your upstream definition, right? And the third one is plugins. So if you know what is the route, upstream, your backend service, and if you know plugins, you can already use API gateway. It's not difficult. That's why I'm going to create first by running this curl command against API 6 admin API, where you can ask API gateway to do some configuration, right? I am adding a single upstream. In my case, this is OpenAI.com, right? It is a backend server. If you remember the picture in the diagram. So with a single node, you can have multiple nodes as well to increase availability, right? You can have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 nodes, and API gateway can route your request using some algorithms. By default, it uses route robin, or you can maybe use your own algorithm. You can write maybe your algorithm. Clear, right? This is how we are creating upstream. First step is just to create the upstream to register my backend service, which is OpenAI.com. I'm going to jump back to the terminal and run once again this. And API gateway says, okay, now you have upstream is created. Next step, we create plugin configuration, because as I said, plugin is important. I am going to use existing plugins called proxy rewrite. It's a quite simple plugin. What it does, it can rewrite upcoming incoming request by setting some headers, by removing some headers, or maybe redefining, rewriting your JSON body, and so on. What I am adding now, as you can see, I am rewriting URI because I had a ask me anything endpoint, right? Now I am rewriting this ask me anything path to /v1/completions because it's a backend server who is responding. And also I am setting header and content type. This is similarly what we did initially without API gateway, right? And the same here, I'm using proxy rewrite to set some headers to my calls. Of course, you can ask Bobur, I can see your key still. Like how we can make this secure? For example, you can also use together with Vault, like a key vault, you can just put the key vaults, or you can use SSL certificates. Here, actually, a little bit like straightforward approach, like where you can see the key, everybody's seeing. Let's create this plugin configuration next. Now I have plugin config with a single one plugin which does this request routing. Then the last step is creating route. Here, how it looks like. I will give a name, description, and I'm saying to API 6, oh, please fetch all the post requests coming to my website.com/askmeanything and forward this request to the upstream backend service. Forward this request to OpenAI, right? And then while you are forwarding it, please use this plugin because I need to set some headers, right? Everybody understands this plugin configuration, routing configuration? Okay, good. But actually, now we are doing it with Coral Command, you can do the same with the dashboard. I will show you later, like you can do the same with the dashboard. So let's create this. Now I have route, plugin config, upstream. The last step, we can test now. But as you can see, like for one difference from the initial configuration without API gateway, we call it directly OpenAI.com. Now I am calling now my own website. My website then calls OpenAI. So let's do that. Let's ask the same question, but as you can see, endpoint is changed. And the host also be different. Like I can have a custom host, and now I can deploy my application to the cloud or to my server. So I have single endpoint. Let's see. We are not going to wait because we know the answer, right? Now it starts answer again like the same like this. This conference, la la la. Yeah, the same answer. So now we introduce API gateway with three very simple steps. And next step, we can think, okay, Bobur, now we have API, and everybody can use, I can use your API, how we can secure it, right? To secure, I'm going to introduce some consumers for my APIs to use, so that not everyone can access my API, like publicly, okay? I'm going to introduce one consumer, let's say username, and it has a password using basic authentication protocol. The basic authentication flow. You can use JWT, token-based authentication, or you can use Open Connect protocol. But for simplicity, let's use basic authentication where we have user name and password. And I have my first consumer number one. I will add through the admin API. So if I do that, I have my first consumer who is ready to use my application, but I need to also update my existing plugin configuration, right? By saying that now I'm enabled basic authentication. Only my consumers can use this API, right? Let's update existing plugin config with patch command, like Coral command, and then enable this basic authentication plugin. Here we go. And now, if I send the same request, I need to add user credentials in my request. Otherwise, if you give a try, like without any credentials, API gateway just rejects your request without thinking about, or without sending your request to OpenAI, because it's saying, like you see, missing authorization in the request because there is no authorization. But now we secured our application, right? Any questions? Everything's fine now? Like how we added? One question. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah. How did you connect this your custom URL to the correct button?
Yeah, it's good. I'm going to repeat the question. Now the question is how we are connected Ask Me Anything path to /completion endpoint, right? Using routes. Like we can just step back. Like here, as you can see, I am defining new URI. In the route configuration, I'm saying /askMeAnything will be new path. You can write in here, for example, any URI, like you can update your URI, like provide description. This API gateway knows which /path should go. Yeah, there's upstream there. Sorry, upstream ID where you can give a reference, like which backend should go. Yeah, it's pretty much clear, right? Thank you. Yep. Oh, thank you. It's actually a really cool question, relevant. I will repeat the question. Where are this configuration will be stored in the runtime? The answer is it's etcd storage. API 6 use etcd storage, not the relational database. Some API gateway use, for example, PostgreSQL, MySQL. It uses etcd like Kubernetes, for example. It's fast. It can fetch some configurations from the storage quite fast. And yeah. Another question? Yep. Yeah, it's also possible. For example, in the runtime, like I'm adding actually in the runtime these plugins, right? I am patching new plugins. I'm adding to existing plugins without stopping my server. It's actually working. Is it answer your question? Yes. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. The question is it possible to declare these configurations in the runtime? Yes, using API gateway control plane. Like if you have admin API and control API, you can ask control API to configure whatever you want. Yeah. So let's just wait. Sorry, let me finish and we can jump into questions, right? I will be back, switch back, right? Okay. Now what we did, we had first consumer, we enabled, did some authentication, right? When we tried without credentials, user credentials, it's failing because API gateway is not allowing to go. But if you provide now credentials, it will work. So let me be back. I mean, if you put username credential, it will work. I'm not gonna test it. Now you believe me, right? It's gonna work. Next step. Okay, now I have a consumer created, and only one consumer can access my API. Let's try to maybe add security feature, like more security feature, like using limit count plugin to add some rate limiting policies. Here is the configuration. Every plugin has a configuration, right? I think it has some attributes. You can specify attributes like a count means like how many times in the time window my client can request my API. Like here in this configuration, I am saying during 60 seconds, my single consumer can request my API up to 2 times. If they try to request more than 2 times within the 60 seconds, API gateway says, sorry. Yeah, you're requesting too frequently. Maybe you need to buy some more kind of API gateway layers, right? Let's enable this as a last, let's say, step. So I'm going to enable add new rate limiting feature to my existing plugin configuration. And if I try to send the same request now, so multiple times, it will not allow me. Let's see. Of course, hopefully we will have enough time within the 60 seconds to get the response from AI. We'll give it a try because it's a little bit slow today. We need to call to OpenAI, like why it's slow. First request done, right? First request, I got a response from AI. Second request, of course, I can get a request again. And also, I will show you in a moment, like in the header, second request, but third request, you see, I cannot do third request because it's limited already. And in the header, API 6 puts some additional headers like how many times remaining requests and how many times you can do more requests, right? Clear now? Why is forbidden error? Okay, great. So if it's clear, the last step I want to show you is adding caching. The same, we enable 3 plugins now. So the first plugin gonna be proxy caching, means I'm gonna cache the API responses from AI to improve performance. So here we go. Now I enabled, again, proxy caching, but let's give a try if it's correct or not. Usually in the demos, I think it's not working well. No? Yeah, yeah, in the demo, sometimes it's gonna happen. Like, actually, what I want to explain you, there's also caching mechanism. For example, first time API 6 saves a response to storage, maybe etcd storage, and then, next time when you request, it takes from the storage. Storage can be your server. I mean, if you have a space, you can store as a caching mechanism. API gateway works quite fast as a cache. You can use I'm not saying you should use API gateway as a cache completely. It's not a caching solution, right? But at least partially you can store somewhere responses from your backend services, right? This is a caching feature. You can do more. I will let do yourself, a lot of features there was there, like observability that I really like. You can connect to Grafana, for example. As you can see, I'm using Docker Desktop on the Windows machine. But if you have other operating systems, you can use also by installing the Docker and run inside the container all these necessary components of API 6, like etcd, right? API 6 itself, dashboard. This dashboard is interesting, because, let me log in first. It's admin. By default, you can go and log in. You see, I have a route and upstream. That's we created through the curl commands, but you can also configure it on the UI. For example, you can enable some retry mechanism, timeout, health check, circuit breaking, all the resiliency patterns you can enable out of the box using API Gateway. This is also another feature. All right? Please go and try. I mean, it's for free. Actually, you can see also some Chinese here words because we have some contributors. They forgot to translate into to English, right? So great. Now we have 12 minutes left. If everything is clear up to now, let's switch to Q&A session, right? I believe some people had a question, and we can discuss now the questions. And then I can do some summary with takeaways. So takeaways is simple, right? We are saying if you want to use API or OpenAI, please use API management solution. And there are some API gateway basics, upstream, route, plugin. You need to learn it. You need to install the plugins, starting from proxy caching, security, right? Or you can manage your API consumers from the single entry point. This is the takeaway for you. Don't forget, and there are some references I'm leaving out, if you want to learn more about the API 6 and the questions. Sorry, yeah, this one or? Yeah, super fast, yeah, sorry. So, questions? Sure, sorry, go ahead. Yes. Yes, thank you. So, good question. I will repeat the question. The question is, can we use as Kubernetes ingress this API gateway? Yes. We have a separate project for ingress controller. You can use Kubernetes as a Kubernetes ingress controller. If you check the Kubernetes website, also we are on the third place, in terms of usability. Kubernetes users are using API 6 as ingress controller. And I would say more people nowadays using actually Kubernetes ingress instead of API gateway inside the service, 60% of the time. A good question, thank you. And I should have a T-shirt for you because you ask a really cool question. Yeah, I have two more. If you want, ask questions. Yeah, you asked it already. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, it's a bit far. Maybe microphone. I can. Sorry. Yeah.
Is it coupled with etcd as the only one option, or we can pin our own key value
Yes, yeah, good question. Yeah, actually, there are some deployment modes, different 4 type of deployment modes. The question was like, can we use without etcd, or can we use with other maybe data storage, right? Yes, you can use. You can deploy API 6 standalone version. You can deploy with API 6 with etcd, or you can have one etcd, multiple API 6 instances, and so on. Your question is like, I mean, you can use API 6 with other relational database as well. Please check the documentation. I believe there should have some guideline like how you can use with another storage. Yeah. One T-shirt for you. Good. I have last T-shirt on me, but different size. But size is, I believe it should be good. Yes. Yes, nice question. The question is, can we combine with AWS API Gateway or Azure API Management, this API 6, right? Yes, you can use, for example, instead of using, I'm not saying instead of using, because if you're using already, it's clear. You can use together, like one API Gateway does maybe some other configuration, and AWS API Gateway does other sort of work. It's also possible. There are some examples like how you can deploy to AWS, API Gateway, because it's cloud native. I mean, anyway, you can use it without any problem. Does that answer your question, or? Yeah. You can deploy to EKS, for example. Yeah, it's straightforward. I tried myself to deploy to Azure containers. It worked well. I used with Azure container. It's totally fine. Or to another cloud, yeah. One more? We have 8 minutes, yeah, we have more time. Yeah, who was the first? You, sorry.
Okay. So, does this plugin have any priority? For example, would it catch even if I was rejected?
Yeah, good question. The question was like, is it possible to prioritize these plugins? So that first plugin should run first, second plugin should come next. Yes, you can put some prioritization. There are priority attribute of each plugin. Like you can, if you put move higher priority, this plugin comes first. But there is a limitations because it's Nginx based. Nginx has a phases, request phases, where there are 3 or 4 type of request phases. If it's like access phase or security phase, you cannot prioritize them. There are some rules. Like where you can prioritize your plugins or not. But custom plugins, you can always prioritize. Yeah. Good question, actually, very relevant. You, go ahead.
My question is, for which types of data to have a responsive using OpenAI? I saw that there was a text responses. Can we use also to generate some code and edit?
Yes. Yes, yeah, I mean, we use it. Yeah, good question. The question was like, can we use for other use cases, like, code generation endpoint, for example. Yeah, you can, for example, first check OpenAI.com documentation. There is a code completion endpoint, and start to integrate to API Gateway. Because endpoint changed anyway, but the job of API Gateway never changed, right? You can use the same caching feature, as the same security features, so on.
And should we use additional plugins for?
No, because it's just the URI changes, right? It doesn't matter. For example, I am a Java developer. I was using all the time Spring Framework or some other new frameworks, right, lightweight frameworks. But if my backend service built on a Spring, I can also use API Gateway, because API Gateway is not tied to a specific framework. If I'm .NET developer, I can use ASP.NET like, to build my backend. So.
And did you test code generation or only text?
Well, yeah. Yes, yeah. I mean, yes. You can test, for example, the same. You can write the code in Java to make a call to REST API of AI, and it works well.
And did you like those parts of the code that you generated, or you like what is your preference?
For example, it depends on your use case. Like if you have a Java application can in the backend can make a request to API gateway first, and then API gateway can forward this request to the AI. I mean, we can discuss maybe this after this session to understand better your use case, right? Okay, good question. So 5 minutes we have. No, I don't. I don't want the question from you. No. Let's meet after. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good question. Thank you. The question was like, can we do like tenant-based or instance-based the customer? Yeah. Yeah, nice question. If you have multiple instances, like you can have a multiple routes. Means for the route, let's say one route has a rate limiting plugin, right? Yeah. Yeah, if you have single storage, etcd storage, which is, how to say, shared by multiple instances of API 6, you can achieve that. Because etcd is one, like one storage, where you can get this rate limiting the configuration and check before request comes. Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a little bit a technical question, more dive. If you want me, we can exchange the contact, and I can check, like technically, how we can do this, the higher performance response, like on this storage. But I should have some documentation where, like, for your case, we can where we can share limit rating information among the instances. I'm gonna check for you, of course. We can. Thank you, thank you. Anything? Yeah, I'm gonna go. Sorry.
Do you have some big names of companies that have trusted this solution and used it?
Nice question. And the question is, who is using API 6? API 6 is used by many companies. I can even show you the website. I think somewhere it's mentioned on the website, our users. As far as I know, sometimes it's difficult to identify who is using your open source project, right? But let me see. Or case studies. Let's go to case studies. I think it was used by NATO. One of the example, a great example, NATO was using API 6 and also Tencent Cloud, which is also in China, the famous cloud provider. And also Zoom was using API 6, as far as I remember. There are some use cases you can check, but there is a lot of famous companies you can think. Yeah. So, one more? Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to write your own plugin, right? You can, of course, the best way will be if you use the Lua programming language. But you can say, I don't know, Lua. But ChatGPT can write some Lua code for you. I'm not joking. Actually, it works. But if you want to write, in which programming you want to write, like Python or Go? Yeah, because we have Python plugin runner. It's not officially supported by API 6, but we have community developed plugin runner. I heard that some people were successful, create some plugins and they're using. I can send you a link, like there's a Python plugin runner, so you can check how to write in Python plugin.
Two other questions.
Yeah.
One of them is, what other protocols other than HTTP? So if there is WebSockets that
gRPC, for example. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There is also a special configuration, like you can set not HTTP, but gRPC call, for example. An API gateway, it's actually a nice feature of API gateway. You can convert from gRPC to REST or vice versa. Yeah. Yes, we can exchange with your contact. Like I will send you a link, the performance of, for example, how API 6 faster than Kong. I hope there is no Kong users, right? But the Kong is actually API 6 a little bit faster than Kong. If you compare the performance wise, there was, I think, somewhere in the website as well. Like today it's quite slow, the Wi-Fi. What is? Just a moment. Yeah, here. Like other API gateways, like how it's, but there is documentation for the performance. You can check. Okay. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, the same, because it's built with OpenRest and Nginx. So we have in our code base Lua, some libraries, Nginx modules we use. You can also always use, for example, there's a serverless function plugin where you can write serverless code in Lua and do some logic. I have some blog posts written, like you can check on DevTools, Medium, Hashnote, everywhere. Yeah, welcome. So now we are done. Like maybe if you have other questions, I'm still here. I will be in the party. We can discuss more these questions, right? Thank you for attention. Thank you. Yeah.